Why does she treat me this way? Why can't she release the grip? Why does she need to criticize everything I do? Why doesn't she like me? Why can't things just be easy? There's always drama with this woman. Hi there, welcome back to the Mind Your Boundaries podcast, episode number 9. I'm your host, Jessica Miller, and today we're taking our discussion, which we're talking about mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws and that whole dynamic, but we're taking it full circle. In the last episode, we looked at this through the mother-in-law's lens. Now today, daughter-in-laws, you're up. We have a different background today. We're in my private practice. I had some free time between sessions. Some clients were sick, and I really want to get this out before Christmas. So we're doing it here. I'm standing in front of a window for some light. So what are we talking about today? Today, I want to help daughter-in-laws gain some insight, dig deeper, and figure out what's behind these toxic-like negative behaviors from my mother-in-law. Like, why doesn't she just like me? Why isn't it just easy? We're going to talk about that, give you some insights through stories. So I have client stories, and then we're going to just talk about some practical tools that you can use, some scripts. So it's a lot of very helpful information. So make sure you have your pen ready so you can jot down notes, and let's get started. If you are a daughter-in-law and you've ever felt in competition with your mother-in-law, I want you to drop the 100 emoji, like 100%, in the comments below. Because I think the feeling of being in competition with your mother-in-law is more common than we realize. And why is that? You wouldn't think it would be that way. We're both coming together, we love the same man, so it's just more love for one person. Why would it be so difficult? Well, I think it's just that. We have one woman that has decades of history and memories and just experiences with this man. And as the new woman comes in, they see that door closing. And then the new woman that's coming in, bopping in with an empty suitcase that doesn't have any memories, no experiences, just fresh eyes and ready to like build a life together. Their world is just opening up. So one is closing, sad, there's an end, it's different, right? After the wife comes in. And then the other one, it's just full of anticipation and dreams. So even though you're both loving the same man, I believe there is that something's coming to an end while another thing is taking off and exploding. And there is some innate jealousy there. And as moms, especially boy moms, we know that, well, any mom knows that once your kids become adults, you have to take a back seat. You have to accept that you've done the best you can and let them go. And even though you can see things happening like a slow train crash and you know it's gonna like come to a bad conclusion, it's almost as if you are behind plexiglass and you're banging like, this is gonna happen. And then your kid is on the other side like, what, Mom? I can't hear you. What are you trying to, do you know what she's trying to say? It's very frustrating, but every good mom knows you gotta take that back seat. You gotta let your adults flourish and have autonomy and individuality. You have to allow that, because if you are too overbearing, sometimes it can lead to them pulling away further. So you have to have personal boundaries and just know your limits as a mom as your kids become adults. As moms of men, we definitely know that we sit in the passenger seat. We are their first love, right? But as soon as that potential wife comes in, we need to graciously exit the car and get in the back seat. Most moms do this great, and yet there's some that struggle. The ones that struggle and they won't get out of that flipping car. That's who we're talking about today. Like, why won't they get out of the car? Like, what's keeping them stuck in that role? What's keeping them in this pattern where they're actually displaying very toxic-like behaviors to the new woman in town? What's going on there? So we're going to talk about types of toxic mother-in-laws, the reason why they do these types of behaviors, how you set proper boundaries, like healthy boundaries, to hopefully lead to stronger relationships, whether it's with your partner and hopefully your mother-in-law, maybe not now, but down the road. And we're gonna do this, of course, through stories. Haley loved Max's family. Right from day one, she fell head over heels for them. They called each other regularly, like daily. They got together. Sometimes they would even vacation together. She felt, whenever she went over to hang out, like she was stepping on to a Hallmark movie scene or a Hallmark movie because they were so close and loved each other that much. It was perfect and going so well, no red flags, until she started planning for their wedding. That's when Max's mom, Tina, got a little too involved, a little overzealous on helping Haley write the vows, pick out the gifts, plan the honeymoon. And when they're on the honeymoon, she somehow made it a requirement, even though it wasn't a requirement, it was a known expectation to call her every day to like FaceTime the family and tell them what they did that day. It started to feel like for Hallie, she was standing too close. You know, the mother-in-law was just like too close. You know that feeling when somebody just has no sense of personal space? That's what was happening. 3 years after the wedding, they finally had enough saved and they were going to buy their first house. Of course, Tina has a best friend that's a real estate agent. She got them to hire her. But because they were so close, it seemed like Tina and the real estate agent were going out and house hunting. And then Tina, the real estate agent, and Max went and saw a few houses without Hallie. But she didn't know what to say because it was all done in such kindness and love. She's like, how can I say this is wrong when all Tina is trying to do is look out for our best interest? And plus, it wasn't like the houses they were looking at wasn't in her taste. She loved them. She just still felt like just a little close, Tina. Tina also had so many traditions, and everything kind of fed on each other during the holidays, where Hallie just didn't feel like she could miss any of them. So even though it wasn't mandatory, it definitely felt like her attendance was expected. And she let her parents and her side of the family just kind of eat dirt. After a while, this just started to really eat her alive. Jennifer's mother-in-law, Maggie, invited her or welcomed her into the family just fine, like well enough in the beginning. And things changed once the first grandchild was brought into the family. All of a sudden, Maggie wanted to be over quite often and help out, which Jennifer was so grateful for. Like, she would help out with dishes and cleaning and baby things, but it wasn't just focused on the baby. She truly was trying to help out Jennifer. The other thing that was happening all the time was Maggie was starting to nitpick and get really critical on every single thing that Jennifer was doing with the baby. When the baby would fuss and Jennifer would go over to pick up her daughter, Maggie would be like, oh, no, you're gonna give her too much attention, and it's best just to let her cry it out. When she would go to heat up the bottle because she chose not to nurse, Maggie would say things like, you know, I wonder if she's missing out on some nutrients. I wonder if it would be easier if you didn't have to go through all the bottles and you could just sit down and nestle your baby and nurse. When she was burping the baby, she wasn't holding her right. She wasn't burping her enough. Just really started to wear her thin. Jennifer knew it was coming from a good place. However, it cut deeper because Jennifer's father was hypercritical, and it just kind of reaffirmed to Jennifer, like at her core, like that hurt little wounded girl inside of her, that she wasn't good enough. Brandy had been dating Brian for 3 weeks when he tragically lost his father to a car accident. Now, at first, his mother, Nancy, like globbed onto him for soul support. And Brandy completely understood. She backed off. She did whatever she could to also support Nancy. It was kind of like she just got sucked into the chaos, like from day one. So it wasn't like they were dating or courting anymore. It was like they were engulfed in grief and just survival. And there were some things that, you know, early on she was thinking, that's a lot to ask from your son. But she didn't want to judge, because for her, she said, who am I to judge? I've never lost a spouse. I don't know what it would be like or how I would even respond. So she just didn't even pay attention to it. As time went on, Brandy started to notice a pattern. It seemed like Nancy always had a crisis. The night that they announced their engagement, Nancy had to have Brian take her to a vet, like an emergency vet, because she swore her dog ate something that was going to make him die. So Brian spent all night at a vet's office on the night of their engagement announcement, came home like in the wee hours of the morning. Turns out the dog was just fine, and Brian had to foot the bill. Most nights during the week, Nancy would call Brian in some type of turmoil or drama from either her mom, her sisters, or one of his siblings. They would either talk for 45 minutes to an hour, eating up their entire dinner conversation or dinner time, or she would request or demand or beg Brian come over and just be with her to console her because she was having another bad day. Brandy tried her best to have patience with this whole situation and Nancy's grief, but after 4 years after Brian's dad passed, she decided she was going to mention something to Nancy because maybe she didn't realize the strain it was causing their relationship or what it was really doing to Brian. Because after he got home from these SOS calls or these like emergencies or another crisis, he was drained, and it was literally sucking the life out of their relationship. Brandy went over, tried to talk to Nancy about how this is impacting Brian and their relationship, and she was absolutely stunned by Nancy's reaction. She became enraged, and she stood up. She was just like wailing her hands and just screaming extremely mean and hurtful things at Brandy, and she was just like in shock. She couldn't even respond. She was absolutely speechless. We're going to talk about 3 types of toxic mother-in-laws today. The first one, Hallie's mother-in-law, we will call her the helicopter maven. This is the one that's overly close, overly involved, seems to feel like she's the expert on all things her child. Jennifer's mother-in-law, Maggie, we'll call her the know-it-all critic. She insists on giving unsolicited advice, which puts a strain on the relationship. Brandy's widowed mother-in-law is the master of chaos. They always have an emergency or a crisis. They're very self-absorbed, and they have zero consideration for others. What causes these mother-in-laws to sit in the car, hunker down, and not get in the back seat? Well, your mother-in-law had parents too. They have family beliefs, values, and patterns. You also have trauma. She has experiences all up until this point that could be leading to her or preventing her from being open to new beliefs, new rules, new expectations. We have genetics, the way we're wired, disordered thinking, untreated mental illness. Much like the daughter-in-laws, when we talked about the toxic daughter-in-laws, the behavior that they display to you, like the negative, toxic stuff, is about them, not you. More often than not, I have found mother-in-laws that will not get out of the car. They are tethered to a role that they have created. So the overbearing mother, she's tethered to that role. Like she doesn't feel like she has an identity without being the super mom, the over-involved mom that needs to direct and help her children on a daily basis, whether they're 3 or 30. And the other part is a lot of jealousy. There's a lot of ego involved, and they feel threatened by the newcomer, and they just bear down and they lock the door and they will not get out of the car. Just like in episode 8, when we peeked behind the curtain and we dug deep and we looked at the daughter-in-law's childhood, like what could be going on underneath this behavior? Like what's prompting this behavior or motivating it? Let's do the same thing with the mother-in-laws. Hallie and her helicopter maven mother-in-law, Tina. Tina was raised very feral. She was raised by parents that allowed her and her siblings to run until the streetlights came on. They never came to her sporting events, didn't care how she did at school. I mean, she was just alone a lot, and she didn't feel important or like a priority to her family at all. And she swore that she was going to do the exact opposite. She was going to make sure her kids knew that she loved them, just constantly loved them. That family was everything, that you did everything as a family and you stuck together no matter what. And so she created these beliefs, this dream, this fantasy at like 13. This is what she wanted and what she lived for. So she went to college for as long as she could until she met her husband that had the same belief. He finished college, but she got pregnant right away, and they started their family and living the dream she wanted. And that's what they did. They poured everything. She never pursued a career. She only wanted to be the best mom, the number one person in her child's life, like all her kids. And that's what she focused on, and that's what she accomplished in life. What's dangerous about what Tina did is that when you come so across the line, when you become so over the top that you think you need to be your child's everything in order to have an identity, that's dangerous. Kids age, they get older, they need to be autonomous individuals, and they need to create their own life. And in order to do that, they need to have space, to have oxygen, to get their flame going and create their life and just have their own identity. But with moms like Tina, they can't allow that. They always need to keep the wings clipped of their children so they can't fly the nest. Because as soon as those kids fly, she doesn't feel like she has a role, a purpose, and she doesn't know who she is if she's not a mom. Jennifer's know-it-all mother-in-law, Maggie, grew up with a mother that was extremely critical, but in a mean way. Not in a helpful way, like I'm critiquing you because I'm trying to make you better, and I don't know any other way to do it. It wasn't like that. She would publicly humiliate her, and she even got her husband on board so that he would echo her mom's critique. So even when she was trying to parent, he would echo the same stuff. Brandy's master of chaos mother-in-law, Nancy, had a very rocky upbringing. Her dad abandoned the family when she was 10 years old once he found out that his wife was still cheating on him. And after that, it just seemed like there was a new guy every single week or every other week inside Nancy's home, like through her mom's bedroom. Her and her mom fought more like sisters rather than a parent-child, and eventually her mom kicked her out at 13 to go live with her grandma. Nancy was always told that she was a drama queen, insensitive, selfish, inconsiderate. So how do you set healthy boundaries with mother-in-laws that are exhibiting these toxic traits and behaviors to you? Well, number one, you have to shift your focus. And right now, even before we're talking about everything you have to do, I'm sure you're thinking, why do I have to be the one to change? They're the crazy ones. It's because you have a clearer understanding of this. They don't understand why they're not getting out of the car. And you want them to get out of the car so you guys can just have a peaceful relationship, a peaceful journey through this life. The first thing I want you to ask yourself is, what have I done to contribute to this relationship dynamic, to this mess? What have I done to contribute? Because you've obviously done something. And no matter how perfect you think you are, we're not all that great. So just think about it. Have you ruminated? This is the most common thing. So it's not like you're actually back talking to your mother-in-law, but when she does something mean to you, do you think about it over and over and over and what you wish you could have said if you wouldn't have been stunned? Or do you go talk to your girlfriends over and over and over about it? Do you talk to your own mother about it? Do you talk to your sisters about it? Is it just kind of consuming you? Like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, you've kind of made yourself this victim. That is contributing to the problem, because every single time you run through the scenario, you run through the toxic behaviors, you are building this confirmation bias that Tina is a helicopter maven. Maggie is a know-it-all critic. Nancy is the master of chaos. And so then, no matter what your mother-in-law does, she's lumped into that. Her behavior is attributed to what you've defined her as. It's confirmation bias. So even if Maggie does something and it wasn't a critique, it was just a helpful suggestion or an idea, but it wasn't a critique, you will file it away as a critique because that's who she is. She is a know-it-all critic. And that contributes to this mess. So really step back, think about and ask yourself, journal a little bit, go buy yourself a nice cup of coffee and ask, What have I done to contribute to this mess? You will be surprised how much confirmation bias really does influence it. Again, we all do it to preserve energy as we decide who a person is. And once we've decided, everything they do confirms our bias. We relate it back to, yep, I knew it. That's who they are. That's because that's who they are. So really get a clear view of your contribution to the mess. Next, ask yourself, have I been having some unrealistic expectations on myself? Like, have I been expecting myself to be okay with being mistreated? Like, I'm strong, I can handle this, words don't bother me. It doesn't matter if somebody stands too close to me. Like, have you been expecting too much from yourself? Have you been expecting too much from your partner? Like, they have this history, they're bound to their mom, and they've been trained with this pattern of interaction or their personality. They know that this is their normal. And have you expected them to drop that and see things your way through your lens the moment you said I do? If that's the case, that's unrealistic. That needs time. That evolves through time and lots of work for them to see things through a different lens, a new perspective, because they've been with their mom for decades. And so they will naturally side with her because that's their normal. And you're the new one in town. You're the one saying, this crap isn't normal here. And they're saying, I think you're weird. Like, I think you had a trouble upbringing. That's why you can't handle how great my family is. Like, their first instinct is to defend their normal. And so expecting them to immediately see it through your lens is unrealistic. How about our expectations of our in-laws? We all want them to love us and accept us and celebrate us because we love their kid. And we're just like, yes, this is an automatic. That's not true. They do not have to like us. And they don't automatically accept us just because their kid loves us and chose us to be their significant other. That's not how it works. That is unrealistic expectations. So the first thing is acceptance, because we're trying to get rid of some of this resentment, some of this anger before you even have a conversation with your partner, before you even have a conversation with them, which is coming. Accept that your in-laws, they don't have to love you. Accept that your in-laws might never be the people you want them to be. Accept that you are not a victim, that their negative, toxic acts and behaviors towards you isn't about you. That means you can set boundaries. And accept that your partner does have room for growth. So remember what a boundary is. A boundary is a self-imposed rule or limit meant to keep us safe, balanced, and strengthen our relationships. So when we're setting these boundaries, right now, a lot of resentment is being made and built and eroding relationships between you and your mother-in-law, but also between you and your partner. So a boundary needs to be set up so that we strengthen your relationships again and that you feel safe and balanced. So the 3 steps in setting boundaries is you identify, you communicate, and then you hold. So this first step is getting quiet and really trying to figure out what boundaries you need. So with the 3 women, the 3 stories I've shared, I asked them to do the same thing. So you don't want to take away everything about your mother-in-laws. You don't want to just attack and have boundaries around all these certain areas. But what are some things that really matter? And you're just like, this needs to stop because it is sucking the life out of our relationship, because it's cutting me down to the core, because it's, whatever, you just name it, but you need to think, what do I really, really need? And once you figure that out, then it's time to go to your partner and talk, because you got to be on the same page. Once you go to your partner, always be respectful. So that's why you go through the acceptance piece. You figure out what your role has been throughout all this so that you can release some of that anger. And when you go to your partner, you're respectful, you're calm, you're put together. Because trust me, they'll be able to hear you a lot better than if you say like, that beep, right? And instead, if you're saying, I know your mom doesn't mean any harm, and this is really affecting me, it's way different. Don't start off a conversation with your partner with, we need to talk. In our culture, we know that's not awesome. Like, nobody wants to hear that. So instead, just say, I need your help with something that's really bothering me. Do you have a minute? So after they say, yeah, sure, I have a minute, let's talk. Haley, with the mother-in-law that's the helicopter maven, Tina, she went to Max and she said, hey, I need your help, something's bothering me, do you happen to have a minute? And so they sat down to chat, and she said, your mom, Max, is such a good mom. Like, you and your siblings are her world. I totally know that. And all the holiday traditions and everything that she sets up, it's amazing, but it also makes me feel like my family just eats dirt, and the guilt is starting to really pile up, and I'm feeling more and more sad around the holidays instead of excited. And now it's actually starting to spill over into our relationship, because you know how I support your family automatically. I know that I haven't expressed this, but I think I've quietly or unknowingly wanted you to advocate for my family, and since you haven't, I'm starting to resent you. The change that I want, and trust me, I don't want to hurt your mom, so please know that I know that this will crush her, but I'm trying to do this very gentle. But what I want is us to start alternating on all major holidays. So I'd like to go talk to your mom so she knows that we're on the same page. And this is what they said to Tina. Max said, Mom, Hallie and I are going to go to her family's on Christmas Eve this year, and then we'll be here all day on Christmas. We absolutely love spending the holidays here with our family, with everything that you put together, because you make it so fun and magical. And she feels like her family is getting the short end of the stick, and she wants to kind of even it out. So I had him leave out that they're going to alternate every year, because I just feel like this first thing, that's going to be enough for Tina to handle. Like, oh my gosh, like, we're not going to have the normal 4 hours on Christmas Eve together. Like, I just wanted that to be able to set in. I also made sure he added compliments, and they both really let her know how much fun they have with her and how magical she makes it. And they're really taking the smallest holiday event away, but they're gonna be there for like 10 hours the next day. Lastly, we made sure that Tina knows Hallie wants to be at all the events. She wants to be there. It's just that she's feeling very guilty that her parents don't get to see them as well, and that's why she's trying to even it out. So it's not that she doesn't want to be there, she just feels bad for her parents. That reframe really keeps Tina's identity intact. Like, okay, they still need me, they still want to need me, they still want to be here with me. I throw this kick butt, gathering or all these events. It's simply her guilt that's making her want to, go and attend something, just give them a little bit. It just, trust me, it just reaffirms like, okay, I'm still fine. I don't have to feel defensive or attacked, nothing like that. For Jennifer and her mother-in-law, her know-it-all Maggie, she went to her husband and said, I know your mom means well when she's here helping with the baby and giving me tips, unsolicited advice, that kind of thing. And it's making me really feel insecure as a mom. Also, when we're all together and she's still doing it, your silence makes me feel like you agree with her. And that's making me feel very hurt and resent you. I need us to go talk to your mom so that she knows what's bothering me, and that she also knows if I have anything or need anything in terms of advice, I'll definitely go to her. But until then, I need her to zip the lip. And this is what they said to Maggie. Maggie, I know you're trying to help me with the baby, and you have so much more experience than I do. I also know you don't realize it, but when you give me advice, I begin to question myself as a new mom. I'm starting to feel really insecure, and that's why I'm bringing this up. Going forward, if I make the promise to you that if I have any questions or need your advice or help, I'll come to you and ask, and then would you agree to give me the space to figure some of this stuff out on my own and parent the way that I want to? Maggie was defensive at first. I think it's just everyone's natural, like, oh, I'm feeling hurt and misunderstood, and you want to stop it. And so she was feeling defensive at first, and then she broke down into tears. And she actually explained to Jennifer what she was doing, and she explained her story of everything she went through as a child, and she felt just awful. Brandy and her master of chaos mother-in-law, Nancy, She went to Brian and said, look, I know your mom has gone through more than I could ever know, more than I ever want to know. I know that, and I know you're only trying to help her, but every time you drop our life and run to meet her need, whatever it is, it makes me feel like I don't have a place in your life. I feel less important. I feel like I don't matter. It's been 4 years of this, and it's not letting up. I have tried to talk to her myself. You know what a disaster that turned out to be, actually, like just an absolute disaster. But her demands, her emergencies, her crises, it's sucking the life out of our relationship. And frankly, I can't do it anymore. I'm starting to resent you for not balancing this out on your own. What I need from you is to set a boundary around our nightly dinners. So there is no more calls, and I want you to tell her that she can call one of your other siblings for support during the weeknights. Okay, guys, this mother-in-law will get upset. The master of chaos only thinks about themselves. They are absorbed. They do not have, like, self-absorbed. They do not have consideration for others. They don't have the skill set. So I'm not saying they're a bad person. I'm saying when we're 12, our vernacular is inward, and it points inward. It's all about us, and we are very self-absorbed. We're very worried about what other people think of us. It's all about me, how the world affects me, how you affect me. They don't think about how I impact the world, ever. And then after we go through puberty, it flips out, and then we start to go through the world like, how do I impact the world? How do I show up in the world? Like, what am I giving back? And you start to consider other people, and it's about others, not just about yourself. It doesn't happen for the masters of chaos. Theirs is still flipped in, and it's only about them. So they do not have the skill set to mentalize. So for you to try to make them understand what it's like for you, it won't happen. They don't have the ability to empathize. So truly understand that, accept that, because that will help you when you go to set the boundary. Because then you'll realize, okay, I need to be very concrete, as if I'm talking to a 12-year-old. Again, if you go back to, I believe it's episode 7, that's the high conflict personalities one. Here's the script that I helped them create. Mom, Brandy and I are going to start a new nightly routine that pulls me out of our chats. I wanted to let you know this so that if you need anything, you could call Jessica or Chad. Stay calm, repeat as necessary what your boundary is. And if she gets very, very irate, definitely watch that other episode, but just say, I hear that you are upset. I want to help. We have this new routine, and you have 2 other options that you can use if you need support. You have Jessica, Chad, you also have your friend from church. And so you just keep repeating that. If she gets disrespectful, you just say, Mom, we will not be talked to with disrespect. If you can calm yourself down, we can continue the conversation. If not, we're going to leave, and we'll continue the talk when you feel like you can be respectful. And then hold your boundary by getting up and exiting if she can't be respectful. Okay, let's review. It is very hard to be a mom when you're driving in that passenger seat, especially a boy mom, and you are his love, like he just loves you, and you have all this experience and all this bond with him, and it's time to get out of the car and into the back seat. It is very hard. So daughter-in-laws, when you come into this relationship, come into it with so much love and compassion, knowing that if you're blessed with children, you will have to go through this same passage of the torch, and you want to have the same type of karma come back to you. So really lay the foundation well. The friction occurs with the moms that can't get out of the car. And they can't get out of the car because they have different belief systems, different family experiences, disordered thinking, like biochemistry, like biochemical imbalances, untreated mental illness, different rules, expectations. They're cemented in this idea of what role they fill in life, and they feel like if they separate from that identity, they will be worthless and they will not have a purpose. And how do you get on the same page as your partner? You ask yourself, what have I done to contribute to this? How have I contributed to this? How have I formed my confirmation bias, right? And then you get really calm, you go through the acceptance process, and then you go and you kindly bring up the topic. You ask, I need your help with something that's bothering me. Do you have a minute? Once they commit, you kindly say, this is what your mom does. That's very difficult for me. This is how it makes me feel. This is how it's impacting our relationship. And this is what I need us to do about it. So what did you think of today's episode? Do you feel like I did it justice? Do you feel like, so we talked about the daughter-in-laws and through the mother-in-law's lens and what they feel is going on there. And now today we're focusing on like daughter-in-laws that don't feel like they're accepted by their mother-in-laws, and they feel like they're dealing with these toxic behaviors and they don't know why. I hope that you have a better understanding as to why some moms, they can't move over. They can't move over, whether it's mental illness, they can't move over because of it's mainly their ego. It's mainly their, just mistaken beliefs. They're too attached to an identity. I feel like if both sides could have more compassion and kindness for each other, they would feel less threatened. If there could be more like give and take, there'd be less of a threatened dynamic, less competition. But tell me what you thought. Like, did you get any nuggets? Did you learn anything? Let me know. And then next time, we will be diving into the big one. We're going to dive into adult children that go no contact with their parents, and especially like what grandparents can do when that has happened. So when your adult child has just kind of said, nope, because this is a silent epidemic that's happening, and a lot of social media influence is impacting people's decisions because values have changed. It's definitely a different world. I want to talk about it. I want to bring light, a different perspective to this silent epidemic, because it definitely is happening more than you realize, and it is excruciatingly painful for the parents. I hope you have a very, very Merry Christmas, and until next time, make sure you mind your boundaries.